Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with season 12, episode 20 of our weekly Q&A videos / content. It's a video, it's a podcast, it's many things to many people. As you would say, it's all things to all people. This is the season of favorite teams, new and old. We've gone through quite a few different teams.
Yeah.
Who are we looking at today?
So, all right. There's the team itself and then sort of the meta discussion about team. So this is another Justice League team. It is the 5th team with New 52 Wonder Woman. It is the 4th team with Man of Steel Superman. And
who's the third one?
The third one this time is Reverse Flash.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting to me as I was thinking about it, because I wasn't really consciously doing that, I was thinking, oh, another Justice League team that would be good would be... And to me, it really highlights how New 52 Wonder Woman is S tier. She's absolutely what makes this work as a powerful team. And because there are so many different Justice League character skins, the possibilities, I wouldn't say are endless, but they're really, like, there's just so many variations of this that have the same
like oomph
value, like the same oomph. That's a good way to put it. So Man of Steel, and the interesting thing about this is that on a team without New 52 Wonder Woman, Man of Steel Superman is just meh. He's not that great. And it highlights the same problem that you have if you're going to give Tentu Totem and Master's Death Card to somebody else, like, say, Harley Quinn, who could give you your team power, but then not do damage, or do damage, but not a lot of it. Mm-hmm. And New 52 Wonder Woman does a ton of damage, and because of her passive, she's giving her team a ton of power, and Man of Steel Superman leverages that. Now, if you use Man of Steel Superman and gave him Tentu Totem Master's Death Card, he could generate power for himself. He could do all that other stuff that, like the specials and whatever, but the kicker is his stats are relatively low, so he doesn't do as much damage for a given special like New 52 Wonder Woman does for a given promotion at a given elite level.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's on a team with New 52 Wonder Woman, that all goes out the window. You're not sacrificing anything. So let's say you give Master Death Card and Tentu Totem somebody who doesn't have a lot of offensive potential. You're giving up a lot. Mm-hmm. But the way we've geared Man of Steel here, he's got, Claw of Horus, an Enchantress Companion card. And that is a way to strip the opponent's gear completely, when he comes in with 2 bars of power. And we give him Astral Harness to make him our tank. And we're not worried about trying to give him too much more offensive potential, right? His stats are low enough to make it easier. Just leave him be a tank. Give him the functional ability to strip the gears. So his value to the team doesn't rely on him doing damage. It relies on him having an effect, whether it's to kill time, because we don't have Hawkgirl on this team, or to strip gears.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is interesting. Reverse Flash as the third character is a pretty good character as a balance between someone defensive and someone with offensive potential, because his cellular regeneration passive rinses off special damage and special effects. And by virtue of being a Justice League skin, he automatically has offensive potential because he's getting all the power from New 52 Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried something a little different this week by giving Wonder Woman's Lasso of Truth to New 52 Wonder Woman. And just a reminder, because we used it recently with Wonder Woman 600, the Lasso, there's a 20% damage boost to Special 2, heal self 18% on Special 2, and 35% power drain chance on Tag In. So when I was looking at it after the fact and thinking, well, it was kind of a little cute to give Wonder Woman 600 both of her Wonder Woman signature gears. Mm-hmm. I thought we were wasting a bit by doing Special 1 repeatedly, which is what Wonder Woman 600 is really good for. Mm-hmm. I mean, she does damage over time on her Special 2, so the damage is reduced for that, so that doesn't make it a great option unless you really are looking for damage over time. So we're using this gear, the Lasso, the way it was intended. Mm-hmm. Lots of Special 2s, and I gotta tell you, it's pretty good. Mm-hmm. That power drain really makes her that poor man's Rebirth Raven, and it's a nice sort of bonus when it triggers, and it's not necessary when it doesn't, but it's pretty sweet. Mm-hmm. Now, if you'll notice, we give up Hawkgirl. Like we actually haven't used a lot of Hawkgirl on our variations of the Justice League team. We've only used Hawkgirl once, and we generally like to use Hawkgirl a lot. But what's interesting about this team is that little bit of offensive potential from Reverse Flash, and him being a little bit tanky so that he can wait out and survive the longer tag out times that you have to wait for. It's enough. It makes up for it. It's almost, I mean, I feel like when I play Hawkgirl a lot, I'm almost spoiled. You know what I mean? Like you get spoiled by it and you almost expect it. You can't play
because
it's
your new baseline.
Yeah.
It's a benefit, but then if you live with it for so long, then eventually it just sort of is how the game works.
Right. And the beauty of this is the times that we have New 52 Wonder Woman facing somebody with Astro Harness, we're doing enough special ones over and over and over again that we wait out the whole clock for the countdown clock for tagging in and out. And like I said, Astro Harness makes Man of Steel more tanky, and Reverse Flash, it's almost, so he's got cellular regeneration, so he can eat a special. Usually the first one, there's no guarantee for anything after that, but the first one he pretty much eats every time. And we've given him, so as a sort of variation on that, we've given him all three power generating gears: Iva Stick, League of Assassins Knives, Heart of Darkness. He's also in first slot. So what that means is that if we are facing an entry hazard like Gaslight Batman, or if Arkham Knight Harley Quinn is one of the opponent's teammates, he can linger a bit at the beginning and do enough special damage without tagging out so that we can save New 52 Wonder Woman's health for when she can tag and clean against somebody. Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, maybe I should get away from doing Justice League teams, but man, I didn't even realize how, well, maybe I did. That's a lie. I feel like, I as much as I appreciate New 52 Wonder Woman, I've underestimated her a little bit when I really see out of these 20 teams, just not randomly, but just going over my mind about picking what teams, the ones that stand out and the ones that I've been doing more of are the Justice League teams. And they're all New 52 Wonder Woman.
There we go. That's what we're looking at. Our first comment of the week comes from LSR Talcontar 9709, and there's a bit of a back and forth here.
So, and I think, it's interesting. So, sometimes we talk more and engage more with the content of the question. Yeah. Sometimes we do sort of more of not exactly meta-analysis, but I like to take a step back and look at sort of the idea of the discussion that we're having.
Yeah, the shape of the discussion taking place here. And I think we're going to be talking almost exclusively about that.
So do you want to take turns and I'll pretend
you'll read the messages that you wrote.
I'll act out the BDCKR part.
Yeah. So they say, since you guys spent the majority of this episode on politics, I would like to hear a valid, coherent argument for why you would want to vote for Kamala. I haven't heard one yet from any American, so maybe a Canadian will better understand what Americans are going through right now.
So I'm going to step out of character right now and step back into the real character. So I read that the first time, and this was a little bit incoherent to me, because it feels like it's wanting to say something and wanting to avoid saying something.
Yeah, because what Americans are going through right now is unclear, right? It's the real, if there is any indication that this is a bit of a bad faith thing, it's a subtle one, which is, I would like to hear a valid, coherent argument for why you'd want to vote for Kamala. And I think, just to talk about this for a second, because we're mostly not going to talk about and answer the question, but the problem is that valid and coherent, and then saying I haven't heard one from any American, right? It's not super pro-Trump, right? It's not somebody going like Trump #1, whatever.
Well, but it's very much anti-Kamala.
Yeah. But when you say valid and coherent, you're structuring anything I've ever heard that's pro-Kamala is valid and coherent. And valid and coherent
is invalid and incoherent.
Yeah. And it doesn't really mean something, right? When you talk about something being valid, right? There's like a pure like logic, like philosophy way of talking about valid. But to say that somebody's argument is not valid in a question of politics is like really sort of fuzzy. And when you say, coherent, right? Like, so let me give you an example of something that is both valid and coherent and could be your justification for voting for either president, right? Let's talk about let's say you're a single issue voter and your only vote is based off of how things are being handled in Palestine and how things are being handled in Gaza, right? Yeah. And I'm saying how things are being handled. To be clear, I think it's a genocide, but I want to take this broad enough that you could use it as an argument for no matter what perspective you are. Benjamin Netanyahu prefers and has had meetings and talks with Donald Trump, and Benjamin Netanyahu prefers Trump for his candidacy. Right? If you are pro-Israel, that could be a reason. If you're a single issue voter, I'm pro-Israel, the leader of Israel prefers Trump, I should vote for Trump.
Right.
If you are, from my perspective, I'm going to call it anti-genocide, right?
Yeah.
Because
fair.
It's anti, at least in its current form, the current state of Israel, right?
Right.
You're anti-settler colonial. You're anti, a lot of stuff, right? I would obviously, because that's the side I'm on, I have more words and more things to say about that, right? But again, if you care about that, you would vote for the person who the current leadership of Israel less prefers, right? That is valid and coherent. You might not agree with it. I would not agree with the person voting for Trump so that we supply, or I say we, but it's not we, so that America supplies more arms to Israel, so that they fund and support, what I consider to be a genocide, and what I think, like there's been like UN discussion and sanctions. Like there's a lot of discussion, and I think a lot of like historical scholars and stuff, there's a lot of people who are in agreement that this is a very bad thing happening. But if you disagree with me, that's a valid and coherent argument based off of your own positionality for voting for either president based off of just a single point of data, right? And so I think there's a lot of ways you can move the goalpost, and you can say, whatever you hear from people either isn't valid or isn't coherent. It's not enough reason to pick somebody to vote for, or, you're not making sense. But like on a basic level, it's not, if you're looking for a valid or coherent argument, it is not hard to find them. So
the fact that they're saying that there hasn't been any that they've heard brings it, to me, makes this an echo of the no true Scotsman fallacy, where you keep on putting enough conditions to say, well, nothing meets my condition. And when you pick words like valid and coherent, which are very much value-based, they're personal value-based, right? There's something that's very subjective about it.
The thing is, they're both incredibly subjective, but you're positioning yourself as a rational and thoughtful party, right? Yeah. You're just looking for validity and coherency. You're placing yourself as a third-party rational observer,
the arbiter, the judge of all
and
things.
You're just looking for good information, and on a basic level, that's the stance and the posturing of this question. But on a more fundamental level, from when you break it down to its sort of definitions or what these words mean, it's actually indicative if you are looking for this, right? Because you're watching content and then asking a question, looking for it. If you're looking for this but haven't found it, that's a you problem, right? Yeah. There's lots of stuff that I don't agree with that I find both valid and coherent. There's some stuff that I find sort of on a deeper level, maybe logically inconsistent or whatever. And I might even, if I'm sort of worked up a little bit, say like, well, that argument's incoherent. It doesn't make any sense, right? Because X, Y, Z, and give additional context. But if you're really looking for it, it's not hard to find.
So when I took a philosophy class many years ago in university, one of the things that I remember and picked up in sort of a really basic kind of thing they taught us was those if-then statements. Yeah. That if you start off with invalid premises, any conclusion can be true. Yeah. Because if the premise is, you're saying if this condition is met, and it's never met, if the moon were made of green cheese, and it never is, then something, that statement is always true. Yeah. Because you're basing it on an invalid premise. To me, again, not the same thing, but it's got that same flavor that's got my hackles up a bit, because when you start off by saying, here's my premise, I've never heard anything valid or coherent about this topic, then I know it's bad faith. Already. Yeah. And so anyways, that's sort of the discussion of that. You replied. Oh, sorry. And that's only the first part. Like if you ignored all the second part, that would be enough. But the second part is, I haven't heard one yet from any Americans, so maybe a Canadian will better understand what Americans are going through right now. There's something weird about that. Like, I don't know that Canadians can ever know better. Like, you can never know better what somebody else's experience is.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe Canadians will have a more objective perspective, but you never, like, that there's something wrong with that inherently, because again, more echoes of denying other people's experience, which is a common sort of tactic of sort of blaming the victim.
Yeah. So at this point, if you've been paying attention, you might be a little bit, wary of where it's going next.
Oh
but
yeah,
you,
no.
you
So
replied.
I said, sorry. Did you actually listen to the video?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to keep a relatively neutral tone. And to me, this is something that I've learned as I get much older. Is that when I was younger, I used to let things like that sort of give me energy and drive me a little bit, because I'd feel like, I got some time. I got some time to kill it, and I've got less time, less energy now to devote to that kind of stuff. And I'm more interested in just deciding, sort of figuring out what we're actually having. Is this a real discussion?
Yeah.
I'm probably more willing to give the benefit of the doubt sometimes if I'm in that kind of mood. So to me, I think I've sort of figured out for myself a more peaceful way to get that information without putting a lot of effort in. So
yeah, because there's a lot of stuff here that sort of gives you the sense that it's going to go bad, but there's nothing here that's on its face like massively aggressive or whatever, right?
Right.
I'm not interested in nitpicking sort of small choices in language if somebody's asking a good faith question, if somebody's whatever. I'm not going to say, well, first off, valid and coherent, what are you even talking about, right?
Right.
Because that's also not a useful way to have a discussion if somebody's trying to have a discussion with you.
Right.
So they reply, yes, I did. Otherwise, I would not have commented on it. And then you said...
Well, all right. So again, because the point to me is that we actually talked very specifically and very clearly about why you would pick one candidate over the other. And
even if you actually largely disagree with that person's policy, platform, whatever, right?
Right.
Entirely independently of how you feel about them as a candidate. Not entirely, but mostly, largely.
Because we talked, I think, in a lot of detail, actually, about how a small number of choices and a first past the post system is very bad for giving you the perfect candidate.
Yeah. But yeah, not to rehash it too much, it's a better starting place. You pick the place that you want to move from, right?
Right.
The baseline that you want to hopefully continue to shift towards the world you want to see.
And it's a combination, actually, of which one's got a position that's closer to what you want, but also which one is more likely to be convinced to move closer. Because somebody could be away from what you want, are more are agreeable, and there's a positive connotation.
Like amenable?
Amenable, but just sort of that they're more open-minded. That they're more likely to consider possibilities. Then, those are the things I think that you use to deal with that. Anyways, that's not the point. And so I'm thinking, well, that was sort of a non-committal kind of answer. So I said, did you miss the part where we talked about this exact question, or are you C-lining us? So C-lining, is that a term you've heard before?
I've heard it, but I don't remember what it means.
All right, so I'm
referring from context.
Okay, so there's a cartoonist. Oh shoot, I wish I remembered his name right now. He uses pictures from like old time, like 1800s kind of black and white pictures, and makes cartoons out of them.
Yeah,
and it's David something, and I'm gonna feel awful about this because I actually supported his Kickstarter and got a sketch from him and stuff because I really like his work.
That's okay. Just give the information because people will care less about that.
I know. But I care about it, and I figure I can just say it.
That's fair.
So there's a sea lion that's talking to this woman through a bunch of panels, and he's taking a specific rhetorical approach by asking her a bunch of questions that pretend to be in good faith.
Yeah. But
they are just really meant to waste her time explaining stuff that the sea lion already knows or is really obvious.
Or doesn't care about.
Right, exactly. So none of it really matters.
Sort of like a 5-year-old asking a million questions, except they do care about the answer.
Exactly. But it's an adult, and anyways.
And so then they reply, they say, it stemmed from the question of social justice warriors saying the rewards of the week were comparable to Trump and that they were S tier, but you guys just overthought every part of the question and the person's name, thus spending 20 plus minutes on politics. And this is where, it's being like a little insulting. I think 20 plus minutes is supposed to, it's another one of those things where the wording is a little non-committal, but there's clearly a tone, and it's like escalating without escalating. It's sort of that plausible deniability where, you overthought every part of the question. And to be fair, I want to say that this person is largely just being descriptive in a way that's meant to look bad on us. I will say, I think that we did overthink every part of the question, but that's our prerogative as
that was intentional.
as nothing nobody YouTubers who have a very small audience and do this entirely as a hobby, who have no real external incentives other than the ones that we create for ourselves, and I guess like our patrons and you know, the like dollars of ad revenue we get. Right. But like not enough external motivation to really make us compromise on doing whatever it is we want to do.
Yeah.
And so I think some of that overthinking on that one specifically was more indulgent of you, but a lot of times I go off on tangents or whatever, and you very much indulge me. This whole thing is just an exercise in,
navel gazing. Yeah. Oh, there we go. We hit 20 minutes.
There we go. Again. Yeah. Exactly what we want it to be. So, you know, I think on a basic level, I mean,
I think you're at
we talked about the team at the start.
If that's the problem, I think this is the wrong channel for you.
Yeah.
Like,
clearly, it's all that.
It is. This is what it's been for years.
It's been that and only that always. And it's been politics whenever we've wanted it to be. And it's been other stuff whenever we've wanted it to be. If you've watched any amount of our content, especially the Q&As, I mean, if you want sort of largely apolitical, I can't promise apolitical because we might talk about politics in the recap. I can't imagine why, but
I don't think we've done much of that yet. And listen, those are the more popular videos. There's more people who actually watch the recaps than watch these.
Yeah, but whatever. Like that, it's been that and it's always been that. And so it's weird because, you know, this is not, it makes it clear that they have watched the video. But like, I don't know, either edited out in their mind the part where we talked about it, or they're still not seeing that as a valid argument. Maybe they want more, because that's the problem when you talk about valid and coherent. If that's not a valid argument, they go, well, that's not a reason why I would vote for Kamala over anybody else. Yeah. You know,
that's moving goalposts.
And then we could talk about, you know, what we don't like about Donald Trump and how Kamala is different. It's like, well, that's not anything in her platform. Or we could talk about little bits of her platform, and it's like, well, you know, then, but like,
no true Scotsman.
Yeah. But broadly speaking, you know, we've talked broadly about our approach to why you might vote for somebody. That's a valid and coherent argument for why you'd want to vote for somebody.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, too. Actually, I would be a single platform voter for Ontario, because I know that as bad as some governments have been, we're going to have bad governments. We're going to have some that are better. If I'd be willing to put up with 4 years of bad government, assuming that they're never going to be that bad over the top that they're going to ruin the province, if one of them would abolish daylight savings time, or the switch back and forth twice a year, that would be enough. See,
I would not necessarily do it for daylight saving times. I thought you were going to talk about election reform and not having first past the post. And the problem was that Trudeau actually ran on that. And
I know.
I saw an interview with him where he called it one of his like greatest like disappointments or like failings as like a prime minister. And to me, I saw that, and on one hand, I agreed with him, and on the other hand, it made me more frustrated and like him less almost.
Right.
Because if you just were like, I ran on that and I didn't really care about it and whatever, and I swept it under the rug and it's over and it's done, I would have been like, okay, I just feel lied to. But for him to acknowledge it and then still not have done anything about it, right? You have all that time to rectify. It's like when, you know, you come around to election season and the Democrats are saying, oh, well, we need to like enshrine like abortion as a human right. And it was like, you know, so that's why you need to elect us. And it's like, you were already in. You know, you talk about the stuff that you're going to do when you get in. You're in right now. Why have you not been doing it? There is those quote tweets where, you know, Joe Biden, not obviously the man himself, I'd imagine, but just because of sort of the everything about him.
Right.
It doesn't seem like a guy who would use Twitter. Maybe that's me being incorrect, but or unfair to him, but it just doesn't seem like he would. Where he's like, oh, like, we need to do this, and it's related to something in government, and then people would quote tweet it, and they'd be like, yeah, Joe, if only you knew somebody involved in politics, right? Or it's like, who...
So I will make the case. I mean, again, we're Canadian. I don't really have an entirely vested interest in it, but I do recognize that some of the cultural changes that happen in the States sort of bleed their way into Canada.
Yeah.
How Roe versus Wade was fell apart when, you know, the Supreme Court totally invalidated it. It happened relatively late, and I have enough experience with how, not direct experience, but seeing how legislation that is bad works. Is that it still takes a certain amount of time to create the kind of legislation that would protect abortion rights in a way that is defendable, that would make it less likely that a state would be successful when they tried to challenge it. So I'll give them a pass on that, only because it was a relatively late thing that was sort of undermined by the Supreme Court. And when you've got a stacked Supreme Court like that you know is going to be against choice in principle, then you've got to be careful about kind of legislation you try to pass to protect abortion rights.
That's fair. And if it hasn't been clear from all that we've talked about all the time, we are very opinionated people. We come from our own perspectives, and we are also very limited in our knowledge and access to information, right?
Yeah.
I try to be relatively informed in some regards, and I am definitely not informed in other regards. So for all of that, and I think most people are in that place. I think a lot of people think that they are better or worse off, but in terms of what they know, and a lot of people are very confident in what they do know.
Right.
And I hope, I have strong opinions and I do have convictions in my beliefs, but I do hope that I am maintaining and expressing, and that there is some sort of reasonable amount of intellectual humility here to know that there are such limits to what I know. And for however strongly I'm expressing my opinions here, it's also important to say that I am not involved in government, right? I am doing small things here and there to try to make the world more like the world I want to see.
Right.
But I am not at any direct lever of sort of politics or policy. And so the amount of sort of informed I feel like I need to be in order to say, here's how I think things should work, right? Is much less than, somebody who I would expect to actually be making those decisions, right? There's a different sort of burden of education and base of knowledge.
And I will say, I'm very much like you. I don't have a lot of direct contact with power. But if I can see my role as being somebody to make a difference, to make a change, then what I want to be able to do, even if I can't convince people, if somebody says something that I disagree with, that I disagree strongly with, right? Like people who think that abortion is not healthcare, then even if I know I can't convince them, even if I don't convince anybody else, I'm hoping that I do sometimes, to be clear, or I'm hoping that at least for the other people who agree with me, I can give them either language to express what they want or solidarity, so that they know that they are not alone, and it is another voice that speaks out against those who would take away healthcare, and so that people don't feel so alone in thinking that they have to struggle to get healthcare.
Yeah.
I think there's value in that.
I do definitely think there is something to be said for that. Again, it's my basic sort of politics, and I've referred to and around it a lot here, is that I think it's very important to one, be able to picture and imagine what a better world looks like. Because I think on some level, if you don't even have the ability to see something better in your head, you have nothing really at that core that you feel like you're fighting for or working towards. So I think being able to, have some amount of hope and the ability to picture a better future, regardless of how desperate or hopeless things can sometimes feel, to be able to keep that core somewhere in you. And the second thing is to do as much as you can, and that's not just as much as you're physically able, not spend every dollar in your bank account, but as much as you have the emotional and monetary
as much
and
as you
other
spare.
Yeah, as much as you have the resources for to still keep going on and to live your life the way you want to live it, to move the world to be closer to one that you want to live in.
Right.
And that can be small, but it shouldn't just be small if it doesn't have to just be small for you, right? For some people, if you are, for example, something that is always, present in my mind because of my friends and people I know, it's if you are trans, right?
Right.
Existing and being visible as a trans person is a lot. You are doing work towards moving to the world that you want to see. It can sometimes impact your safety, right? It can impact your access to resources. It can impact, the way you are seen by bigots, right? There's a lot of stuff that in a way that it is defiant to be visibly trans and to live your life and to be happy as a trans person.
Right.
That's also I think work to some extent, right?
Sure.
And there's
existing is defiance for some people.
And there's like a lot more you can do as a trans person or a not trans person to further that cause, to make the world that you want to live in a little bit more trans accepting, trans inclusive, to make sure there are more resources and things for those people. But in general, I think that's my sort of two things is you got to picture something better. You got to have a model in your head for what better looks like, even if it's not perfect, even if it's maybe impossible. It's got to be a model that you feel like you can move closer to, that you can picture in your head clear enough that it can anchor you in a perspective, in a direction, right? And then you got to try to move in that direction for whatever you have the resources to do, and not at the detriment of like having a life, right? Yourself.
Right. Don't hurt yourself to do it. Don't give more than you've got, but give what you can spare. And for some people it's a lot, for some people it's less. That's okay.
Well, because part of the world that you live in is people who agree with you, who have the same values as you, living happy and satisfied lives. And so you doing that for yourself is also part of that.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's a
great place to end.
Good place to end it for me. Yeah. To finish up, we'd like to give a huge thank you to our wonderful patrons on Patreon by supporting us monetarily. They're encouraging us to continue to make videos, and hopefully that is the world that they want to see.
Yeah.
So that's a huge thank you. It feels so self-aggrandizing to say that, but I hope it's obvious that it's a joke. But that's a huge thank you to
Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi 127, and Nora Klimek, who are supporting us on the credited level.
So there we go. And that's a huge thank you also to anybody who supports us in any other way that's watching this all the way through. If you're listening to this right now, it's commenting, it's whatever.
Sure.
Liking, I don't know, refreshing the video a bunch of times and watching ads again. That's not a good use of your time. I can't imagine anyone's actually doing that. But if you are, you should stop. We appreciate it, but also,
Yeah.
So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.